So, Cheri Hubry, I want to say thank you so much for coming and joining us today. And I'm super excited to talk to you because you were a brave soul that was part of our first virtual retreat. So, part of the guinea pig class. So, it's going to be really cool to hear. We'll talk a little bit about Ohana Oasis and what your experience was like going through the virtual retreat, which is going to be really cool to hear that for people that might be considering it, wondering if it's the same from at home or what it looks like. And then we'll just get into what it means to be a grieving parent and what good support looks like and kind of cover all of that. So I want to start off with acknowledging exactly why you're here, and would ask that you share a little bit about Justin, how old he was when he passed away, how long it's been for you, and then something that we do in all of our retreats to kind of get to know one another, and that's 5 words to describe him.
Okay. My son's name was Justin, and he was 7 years and 4 months old when he passed away. He had late infantile Batten disease, which is a neurodegenerative terminal disease. He, if I had to describe him in 5 words, I think I actually wrote these words down. So now let me make sure I get them. He was loving. He was really cuddly from a baby on, really cuddly. I would call him joyful. Even his little voice always had a little sing-song bell-like thing to it, which is why we called him Jaybird. He was stubborn, which his father always said determined, but he was very stubborn. He was funny, and I think he was very smart. Every parent might say that, but he was saying lots and lots of words by the end of 2 years, and seemed to be able to distinguish when people were being funny, when they weren't. I think he was smart.
I'm sure he was. So what first brought you to Ohana Oasis?
I'm part of a foundation because the disease my son had, that Justin had, was so very rare. There is a Batten disease foundation group, and some fellow Batten parents had been to Ohana Oasis, and they said it made such a huge impact on their life. They actually encouraged me to get on the wait list. They were like, it's probably already a wait list. And so I've been on the wait list for a long time. I can't wait to actually get there in person.
Yeah. Can't wait to see you in person.
Thank you.
So do you have a favorite fun activity or memory from your even virtual retreat?
From the virtual retreat, during the staycation at the end, Anne encouraged us all to go out and do something, explore, do something fun. And I went ice skating, which I have never done before in my life. But we have a little ice skating pond in the middle of town, downtown, which is where I was staying. So I laughed a lot, which was really good because there's so much deep thought, emotion going on during that time frame. It was nice to get out and laugh. I wouldn't say I will ever go ice skating again. I wouldn't say I loved that, but I had so much fun trying it.
Oh, I love that though. Is there any lesson or experience that's impacted you in the long term? And that can be Ohana Oasis or just in general over the last 7 years.
Well, with Ohana Oasis, the lasting thing was probably, we didn't talk about it a ton in our class, but in one of the videos that was done prior to the class where you explained what was going on, you talked about putting pen to paper, actually setting a time that you write, not editing, just sitting down and writing. And we did it for 2 or 3 lessons for different things. Once was, I think, a letter. Another time was feelings we were having, things like that. I have tried to journal ever since I lost Justin, and journaling has been so hard for me. I find myself editing and almost in case someone else reads it. And it's not even that I'm thinking someone else is reading it. I just tend to even edit myself, not trying to change how I felt, but maybe try to describe it better versus just being so raw. So the whole pen to paper, 10 minutes, pen to paper, 20 minutes, basically just write, no matter how sloppy it gets, no matter whether you want to go back and re-say it another way, just keep going and then put the pen down when you're over. I've actually even used that with work stuff since you guys did that. It has just been so good for me because I tend to overthink everything. So to get my gut reaction on paper, intent to write, has really been a good lesson for me.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. It's actually the same for me. Like, it's really easy to get into the weeds of something. And so where it's just, okay, just flow, let it go. You discover some interesting things, huh?
You really, really do. I mean, when I go back to read it, I still catch myself wanting to edit it and explain what I said versus just saying it.
Yeah. What's been the most surprising thing to you in your journey through loss and grief and embracing life?
The most surprising is how fully it affects absolutely every aspect of your life. I mean, I knew I was going to be sad. I am one of those situations where we knew our son was going to die. It was a terminal disease. You would think you might be a little prepared for it. Not at all. And no idea just the depth of it and the rawness, just how much it really, really hurts. How heavy the burden of grief really feels. That truly surprised me. I wasn't expecting it to be so all-consuming.
What's the biggest lesson that you've learned from that?
Probably to be kind to yourself. I tend to like to be in control of situations. I don't think I try to control other people, but I may try to control the situations. Letting things just be, letting go of that, and being okay with it. Because, yeah, it's not that I care whether people think I'm all right or not. I don't care about that, but just being okay with how big it, being okay with maybe how big it is. I think I wrote this answer down so I wouldn't get all tied up on this.
Okay.
I'm trying to look and see how I wrote it. The biggest, what did you say this was?
I actually didn't throw that one in there. This is one that I.
So I wonder. I think maybe, I mean, really kind of to just, you can't control grief. And I am not really used to that. I was a single mom for years with my older son, and then Justin, because of the type of disease he had, you kind of had everything organized and controlled, and grief is so not organized. It is just, it's like, it's like a tornado goes through your life, and then as soon as you settle it back down, a big wave comes through your life. And it's so, just when I think, just when I think things have settled down, they maybe haven't. And the randomness of what hits you, because the further you get into it, it may not be near as raw. Like at the first couple of years, sometimes I was crying and didn't realize I was crying, just doing things. So it may not be so raw, but then, you know, the stupid leaf flutters over here, or you know, a specific kind of car goes by, and it's not even as predictable as, oh, your favorite song or the cartoon that came on. It's sometimes just so random, the thing that happens, that it hits you like a piano fell on you. I mean, it's just, that has been something I've probably struggled the most with, and have learned that it continues. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, you answered my next question on that. Are there things that you found that help you when you do get those sidewinders of grief that hit you?
Yeah, I think what helps me, sometimes for more than a minute, but sometimes just to allow myself to wallow. That is the one thing, is to just be okay with it. And one of that is in one of my questions here. Another one of the favorite things that I've learned was the be right back. To just take the time to do it. Give yourself that. And then when you're done, you're done. I mean, not that cut and dry, black and white. I didn't mean that to sound flippant, but it's kind of like, I need this right now, or tomorrow from this time to this time, I'm going to do it, and give yourself that. I feel like it takes some pressure off of when it happens.
Yeah. How about a blessing? And I know that, you know, losing a child is devastating and tragic, but there's also good things that can come out of tragedy. So can you think of a blessing?
Um, this one was a really hard one for me to answer because of that. Because I could say the angel parents I've met, because they have been a blessing in my life. But when I say that, I would rather have never met them and my child be alive. So they haven't been that big of a blessing in my life. But I would say they have mainly they've been a blessing because there's someone to commiserate and you feel like you're not alone. My biggest blessing might be just that I feel like I'm not scared of anything now. The worst thing that I can ever imagine pretty much has happened to me. And I don't really get bogged down with little things. That can be good and bad, because sometimes little things where I should maybe have more empathy, I'm like, really? My kid died. So, but the biggest blessing might be that, and really being appreciative. I found that was, I like with nature and stuff, I feel like I see and feel more of the small things, some of that stuff.
That's great. I think those are wonderful blessings. I already asked you about a lesson that you learned from your loss. What are some ways that you continue to honor Justin, both in the day-to-day, everyday life, and then if you have things that you do for anniversaries or birthdays or special occasions or whatever?
Okay. For Justin's death anniversary, we did we did try to plan an event for that for a little bit, and then I started feeling like that was kind of a downer to me. I still have that day is kind of my wallow day, or do something specific to Justin. I don't work, but I've stopped doing anything for his anniversary of his death. For the first 5 years, we did something, and it always had to do with light, fire. You know, we lit the little water candles once on a lake, and we did the sky lanterns one year, and we did lighted balloons, which was beautiful. It really was. But I found that I didn't want to celebrate that day. I really didn't. So, but we do celebrate his birthday big every year. His father and I choose an adventure we think he would have loved, and we try to make it age appropriate for how old he would have been that year. And we take some of his ashes with us for those adventures, and put a little bit of his ashes, typically unique spots during those adventures.
I've never heard anything like that. That's very unique. And what's even more unique is that you guys are no longer together, and yet you still come together for that.
For his birthday. We swore we would always celebrate his birthday. So we do. Sometimes it's just a one-day thing. Most of the time it's a 2 or 3 day thing.
Wow.
We've climbed a couple 14ers and put his ashes on top of them, and we've taken some beautiful hikes. The first year we went to Disney because it was like his favorite place in the world, and I know it's illegal, but put some of his ashes at his favorite rides. And last year he was turning 16, so we figured, what else do you do on a 16th birthday but get in a car with a 16-year-old and get in a car and be terrified. So we went race car driving.
I love that. That's so creative.
We did get in the car and we were terrified. And then when Justin was, after he had stopped walking or was struggling with walking, we started him in horseback riding therapy. And so I'm still on the board of directors of the Stablesbury Road, and we do fundraisers and raise money for the children whose insurance doesn't cover that type of therapy. And the foundation is Justin's Riding Partners. And so we raise some money for that and try to make sure that no kid gets left behind if that's the kind of therapy that could help them. And then for me, long-term, something I've been doing every year, we got Justin's diagnosis before he had any symptoms other than seizures. So when Justin got diagnosed, we made a promise to each other that we would be sad later and we would live every single day, cram as much life, joy, fun, because we knew eventually he wasn't going to be able to walk. Eventually he wasn't going to be able to see. We didn't know how long his life would be, but we knew we had a year and a half, 2 years just to cram a whole bunch in. So both Dad and I took quite a bit of time off work, and we had tons of adventure. So we did that to our kid, and now I do that to myself. I feel like I owe it to him to continue living. I try to do 10 new things a year. They're not all crazy wild, but I try 10 new things a year and try to keep track of that. And I usually take a little bit of him on each of my 10 things too. I know people think that's weird, but I feel like he was never old enough to say, I want my ashes scattered here. Right. So I'd like him to have as many adventures as possible. And I feel like I honor him through continuing to have adventures.
I love that. That's beautiful. Totally beautiful.
Thank you.
What is something that you wish someone had told you at the beginning of your journey?
I think I kind of already answered this. Just that there will be floundering. That is very all-consuming. You don't realize how much it is. I mean, you forget things. For me, I was paralyzed with it. It really paralyzed me. I wish someone maybe had told me how big it is. Because I think before you go through it, you think you're just going to be sad, like when Grandma died. And I'm not belittling that, but I just think you think you're going to be a little sad here and there, and then eventually you're not sad. And that's really not what it is. And I think a lot of us never deal with grief like this because the only people we have lost by the time we're older are grandparents, and it happens in an order, and great grandparents first and then grandparents, and my parents are still alive. So, and I know I'm lucky, I do realize that, but I don't think anyone prepares you that it's not sad, plan a funeral. And I think because even people looking at me, they see me, I work now, I do things, I go on my adventures. I don't think anybody realizes how big of a hole is left there.
How all-encompassing.
How all-encompassing.
Do you think that had somebody told you, is there any way they could have articulated it in a way that you would have understood before actually being in it?
No, but I think they could have explained that it will affect so many parts of your life, and be nice to yourself, and don't expect much from yourself, and be okay with what you're able to do. Like I just saw a meme going around a couple days ago that really meant a lot to me, and it was like, just because I could do it yesterday doesn't mean I can do it today. Just because I can't do it today doesn't mean I can't do it tomorrow. It's just this it's very it's not something that you fix. It's not something that you overcome.
Yeah.
It's not something that you get over. The first time I laughed in public and someone said, "Oh, it's good to see you back to normal," I wanted to choke
them for that.
I wanted to choke them. I mean, it made me feel horrible. So I don't know, just that it's okay. You're okay. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay.
And I think that you touched on something there. You never do go back to your old normal.
Never. Yeah. And it's not even a new normal. There's just nothing normal about it. That's the way I feel. I feel like it's just, there's nothing normal about it.
Yeah. Do you have advice that you would give to a grieving parent?
Just more or less be kind and patient to yourself. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Ask for what you need. Don't be scared to ask for what you need. If you're not comfortable asking, at least don't feel guilty about doing what you need for yourself. Because I think a lot of people don't do what they need because they want other people to not feel uncomfortable. Therefore, they don't do what they necessarily need. And I think being really kind to yourself, and with that, I don't mean just giving yourself time and stuff, but doing what you need. And if you're not willing to ask other people for it, at least do it for yourself.
I think that's
like if it's time alone, you don't have to go out and be with people. You know, if it's not talking about your kid, then it's not talking about your kid. If it is talking about your kid, and then be with people who will allow that.
Yeah. So speaking about talking about your kid, how have you in situations where you're meeting new people or they don't know and you get the awkward questions, how do you broach that?
Well, it depends on what type of group situation I'm in, and how well I know the people. I do always say I have two children. I never just say I have one. If they ask more questions and I talk about him, the truth is, especially with people I don't know, if they ask me questions, I talk about Justin. I answer the questions as if he's alive. I don't lie about anything, but when they start asking things like how old is he, then I say flat out, I've got one son this age, and I've got another son that I lost in 2012. So I'm never dishonest about it, but I never leave him out. There are times that I spend a half hour, 45 minutes with people and never tell them my child died, because maybe I got comfortable enough with them, or I feel like it's just not the right situation that they would care. I didn't used to be able to do that. That is something that has come over a little bit of time. And part of that's with my other child too. I've got a son who doesn't live here. And there are times I go an hour and talk, and I never say exactly where he lives and what he's doing, because the people I'm meeting is sometimes none of their business. But if it's someone that I know I'm going to have a relationship with, that it's more than just small talk, I bring it up pretty upfront, because I would rather know right away how they respond to that. And if there's going to be a second, third, fourth meeting, I don't want to explain later on why I didn't tell them right up front. So I'm pretty upfront about it, except for with total strangers. If they just say, how many kids do you have? I say 2, and I leave it at that.
Gotcha. So talking about other people, I want to talk a little bit about support and what that looks like. So is there somebody or people that did a really good job or continue to do a really good job in supporting you in this? If so, what did they do?
I would say my best support is my older son. And partially was my children were 16 years apart. So my first son was an only child for 16 years, and he probably knows me better than anybody else. When I'm around him, is especially early on, was the only time I felt grounded. And it wasn't necessarily because at that point he was in his 20s when Justin died, so it wasn't like he needed me to take care of him. So I didn't have that, but I had someone who could still treat me totally normal, and who seemed to know when to talk, when not to talk, when to be nice, when to not be nice, and I don't mean mean, but just normal, you know, right. Instead of the whole every time you're around. Right. So and just I think our children always bring us strength. So, and grounding. So with him, I don't even think it was on purpose, but probably that. My sister is probably still, I would say, is my rock. The year before my son died, her husband died unexpectedly, just out of the blue. Everyone in my family thought Justin was going to be the next one to die. And she experienced that loss. She has never tried to compare her loss to mine, but she understands that so much more comes with grief than most of us know. And so she has been a really strong person in my life. Talk about, don't talk about, whatever you want.
Are there any common threads of what they do that makes that support helpful?
I think the common thread is that if I'm having a bad day, that's okay. If I don't want to speak about Justin at all, that's okay. If I'm just having really a lot of fun, they don't pull away from that grief, because it's, I know it sounds really weird, but sometimes when you're having fun out with other people, you almost feel, sometimes because of things they say, but you almost feel guilty as if you've let go. And so the people who know you really well know you are just having a great time, and it has nothing to do with that pain being any less, or you're needing them any less to support you. I don't know if I'm making sense with that, but sometimes you just want to have a really good time. And early on, after Justin died, if I had a really good time, the way people acted around me was very strange. It was almost like they wanted me to fit into their mold of this sad mom, which I was very sad. I don't even think they had any clue how big the grief was. But it was almost like it was their goal to make me smile, laugh, whatever, versus it just let you be. And there are smiles and fun in that. And there is, to be able to talk to Justin, to my sister and Justin's father, and it not have to become a cry session or a whole and coddle and them turn around and say how great everything was, how sad it was that he died. Sometimes you just want to, it's just a memory like it is of my other son. Oh, when he was this, he did this. And you want to be able to have that conversation and just keep moving that conversation, and that I could do with them.
So a couple things that I hear you saying is, number one, to treat Justin's memory just like you would any other child's. Like, you can comment on something that was happening or a memory and then just move on with it and not make it some big thing. And
right. And sometimes with friends, they want to make it a big thing because they think that is supporting you. They think that if I mention his name, maybe I want basically a counseling session. I don't know, or want to be able to discuss it. And sometimes I just want to say how funny it was when he stood up in his red wagon.
right.
And even if that brought a tear to my eye, I don't want it to become a big thing. I want to be able to talk about my child because he is still such a part of my life. He's part of my heart. He was part of my world. And sometimes when I talk about him, it will turn into a cry session, but I don't want it to be like a memorial service every time I bring his name up.
You wish you could talk about him like everybody talks about their kids. They're still
Absolutely.
And then the other thing that I heard you saying was, I think it's a really important point, is that grief and happiness are not mutually exclusive. That you can be in deep, profound grief and still laugh and have a good 5 minutes or even a good 5 hours, and it doesn't negate the grief.
Right. Or even a good 5 days.
Yeah. And so what's one thing that you would like to share with people about losing a child that they don't know?
It is, I think that it's not like any other loss because every stage, like I said, last year we celebrated my kid's 16th birthday. And I guess every loss changes your life, but I think a loss of your child maybe changes your life, especially if they were still in the growing up ages, because every year you would have been doing something different with them, watching them. I at the beginning, I very much worried, and it sounds so unrealistic because I know he was dead, but I worried if he was scared, because 7-year-olds aren't supposed to be without their mom and dad. Every stage, I feel like, where would my life be today if he were here? What would he look like? What would he be doing? What would he be into? This doesn't even answer your question. I know now I think losing a child is different than any other loss. Any other loss. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I don't know what to say to the parents other than I think it's normal that it's not the way life's supposed to be. They're not supposed to go before us. So it is not natural what happened. Therefore, I don't think there is a rule book. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking your time. I don't think there's anything wrong with rushing it. Everybody grieves a little differently. There's not a right or wrong. What works for you, whatever makes you feel a little better, as long as you're not hurting somebody else, I feel like there's no right or wrong or rules to it.
And what about, is there anything that you'd like to share with people that have not been in the situation that you have, that haven't lost a child, that, oh, I just wish they would understand this one thing?
Yeah. I would never wish losing a child on anyone, but I do wish people who haven't lost a child could think before they speak. So I will say, people say some really, really insensitive things, and probably in every aspect of our life we do. But if they could hear some of what they say the way that we hear it, I think mainly I would say think before you speak, um, and appreciate every moment you have. One of the hardest things are when parents complain to me about their kids. It just kills me. I didn't realize, you hear it all the time, birth is a miracle and miracle of birth, or, they even use the word miracle with it, but how true it is to have a healthy child. It
Yeah.
is an unbelievable blessing. And yeah, to have your children near, I would just say appreciate it. And don't be scared. Don't be scared to tell me about your kids. Don't be scared of that. Don't complain to me about your kids, but I still want to hear about them. I still want to hear that you're happy and that you've got a life. And I still want you to stay my friend. Just because my kid died doesn't mean yours will. I do sometimes think that there's something that's almost like a fear, like I might be contagious.
I've said exactly that.
Or something to that effect. We still need regular friends with children, and if they make me sad, I'll walk away, but don't keep them away from me worried that they'll make me sad.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, those are all the questions that I had. Did you have anything else that you would like to share, or that this conversation brought up?
I think some of the questions were sometimes hard, but were really, really good. And I have found what your course did for me was, at least in my situation, working on grief, literally working on it.
It is work.
It helped me more than the sharing experiences, talking, the literal answering those hard questions, and having to be honest with myself. And I will say, having to do that at home and knowing that you're not here to follow up with anything, I probably was more brutally honest with myself than maybe I would have it in person.
Mm-hmm.
Different than when you're doing it by yourself.
It's very different. And I knew that because it's me personally going through it, but then also doing the retreat with just single women versus couples, it was very apparent how different it is. And it's a whole nother level. In some ways harder and in some ways easier, because the thing with couples is that, and you touched on it, you grieve in different ways and you have different expectations. Like you expect your significant other to grieve one way, and your significant other expects you to grieve a certain way. And in one book I read, it was like the perfect word picture. It's like, you've just gotten off the sinking Titanic. All you can do is hold on to a little piece of wood that's going to keep you afloat. You don't have anything in you to reach out to even your child, because you will drown if you try to save your child or you try to save your spouse or whatever, especially in the beginning of grief. And so that it's harder in that way, but in a lot of ways, like you don't have anybody, like at the women's retreats, you don't have anybody you can go to at the end of the night and just be like, oh, that was a heavy day, or laugh over an inside joke that you've had for 10 years.
Right.
So
it changed my life. So I really appreciate you're doing the virtual retreat. And this was a really life-changing thing for me. I'm glad I did it. I almost didn't, but I'm glad that I did. I really, really am. I would have never used the words working on grief, but I think that made a big difference than just commiserating with like minds, if that makes sense. You guys really did a good job connecting us, especially over the weekend thing.
Yeah.
It felt like we got pretty close.
Oh, good. I'm good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was, and I know it's probably part of the questions, but I love what you're doing. I mean, those deep questions they asked, and especially got really, when it was consolidated at the end, which I'm assuming is the way it feels the whole time you're in Hawaii. That weekend was life-changing for me. It really, really was. Just because it was, well, by then we kind of had the tools that you wanted us to have as far as the writing and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But really asking those tough questions to answer, and it being so consolidated, super emotional, but I felt like just incredibly beneficial to me.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
I was just saying, I was like, this has to be the way the whole week feels when they're there, because it's just so on top. I mean, because it compounds, right? I'm assuming that's the way it happens. It's building on each other. And when it's spread out a week in between, maybe it doesn't feel, I mean, although maybe we do better because we have time to think about it all. But yeah.
I think there are probably pluses and minuses to both of the different ways.
I just know that the weekend was really powerful for me, and not just me. I mean, we've talked about that over and over again. The three of us who were there, the moms, talked about that over and over again about how powerful that weekend was. And I don't know if it was those specific lessons, or that by then we had worked up to that point, or if it was because it was consolidated. For me, it felt like I couldn't get away from it because it was all that weekend. So I really, really dealt with stuff that before maybe I'm like, I'll do a little homework. Now I got to go to work. It was super emotional, exhausting, but powerful. Things that have stayed with me that you would have thought 7 years into this, I would have come across before. I don't know. It's really good what you guys are doing. I'm so grateful that you did, because, well, I'll answer your questions.
So
I will say it was an incredible experience for me. It was not like grief counseling was at all. It was just such a very different, because I did do some grief counseling, and this was very different.
How was it different?
I felt like I wasn't trying to say, these are my problems and here's ways to fix it. It was more like truly working on grief and accepting some of the things that are happening in my life that I didn't realize were PTSD or grief, just how it consumes so much of even like little decisions you're making, and how that's kind of back there. Even if you're not thinking, oh, my kid died, I'm missing my kid, I'm sad right now, it's still affecting what you're doing and decisions you're making. And yeah.
Oh, you give me chicken skin.
Oh, good. Well, no, not good, but hey, I'm glad. I mean, that's what it did to me sometimes, and especially over the weekend. The staycation was incredible.